You're live.
We're live, all right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Chef Devin and myself, Lisa, here doing our weekly fireside chat, and our videographer extraordinaire, our director of security, Jess McNutt, is on the other side of the camera.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
We really can't do this alone. So if you do have any questions, or you can't hear us, or like I said, have questions, if you just type that on there, Jess is watching and she'll let us know, and she can relay to us any questions that you have or concerns, or hey, speak up, or hey, Lisa, you're talking too loud, be quiet, anything. She's here to help you communicate with us. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks.
We're here in Packers. It's a little, still empty, still waiting to be filled with people at a social distance, of course. Part of what Devin and I are working on right now are ways to bring people back healthy and respectfully, and making sure that we are watching and taking care of everybody's health and safety, because that is our #1 priority as we look to hopefully reopen sometime soon, that we are really looking at every way, making sure we have markers on the floor, and how we set the tables apart, and how we actually even operate the business is going to look quite different in order to keep everybody safe and healthy, which is our #1 goal. We want to keep you safe, and we also want to keep our team members safe as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll be working on that, and we've actually been working on a new plan for our wine dinners. So our wine dinners, we've been holding those monthly. So I've been here 3.5 years almost now, and so once a month we have a wine dinner. And this month was supposed to be with Ponzi Vineyards from Oregon, and next month in May was supposed to be with Abeja. And Abeja is one of Columbia Hospitality's properties. So Columbia Hospitality is our management company, and so it's one of our sister properties. And they were going to come, and I had already sold like 35 tickets, and so I had to refund people their money, and it's just so sad and awful. So it's something that we really love doing, and if you have not been to one of our wine dinners, you will want to get on the reservation list for the rest of the year, and definitely next year, because, and I'm not just saying that because he's right here and because he's my partner, working partner, but Chef Devin is probably one of the most talented cooks I've ever worked with. The food that he puts out is absolutely spot on. The portions are fantastic. The combination, the pairing of the wines, it's crazy. One of the dinners we were doing, it had like a blueberry on the dessert. I think it was like one of the cheese, like brulees cheese, like brie. It's crazy. And there was a bit of a blueberry compote, and it was crazy. The wine that was paired with it was so dry, so you'd always taste the wine first, then taste a little bit of the food, and then all of a sudden I could taste blueberry in the wine, and the whole wine had totally changed. It was so cool. So it's such a fun experience. So we wanted to add on to that. So our plan going into this summer, so as of right now, we are planning on having June's wine dinner. That's with Jade Bookwalter from Walla Walla. And we're going to be holding them in the tent, weather permitting, but even if it's inside, the space will be big enough, like a U shape, so it'll be big enough where we can keep you socially distanced, and we can keep our staff socially distanced from you as well. And Chef Devin is going to be situated in the middle of the U shape, and he's going to be talking and demonstrating his techniques and the dishes as they are being created, and as we bring them out to you at a safe distance. So fun, something totally new, very interactive. We'll be doing some filming of them and putting together some video clips, and that will be part of our series as we continue, as we open. We still want to be able to have videos with you and let you know what's going on. And I know everybody, the feedback is everyone's just so enjoying Devin's presentations and his knowledge, and very, very, I know, just making your head go bigger, but he really is fantastic. So it's so much fun learning. And so the wine dinners will be definitely capped. You'll definitely have to make a reservation. far off in advance, and you'll contact me. My information's on the website, and I'll get you a reservation for that, and you won't want to miss it because it's going to be a lot of fun and totally kind of different idea, and so really excited about that. And so let's talk. Do you want to talk anything more about the wine dinners before?
No, just that it's going to be very fun, interactive. I know that the way that I've been looking to change up the wine dinners for a little while and make it more interactive with myself and the cooks, and I feel like a great part of that is the questions that the clientele has and the reasons behind stuff, and so that'll give us the opportunity just to interact a lot more, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be really fun, and it'll just be kind of a way to add a new life into one of our old programs, because we kind of have to figure out the new situation, but we're trying to look at everything right now as an opportunity to change and do things differently in a way that very intentionally and sustainably, so that it's something that is beneficial and creates a great experience, but then also is lasting and is a great experience that we can continue to utilize for years. So,
because I think we've all figured out by now we're in this for a little bit of a longer haul, and so having to rethink our programming and how we serve you has been a big challenge, but actually for us, this is when we get to be a little creative, so it's a lot of fun. And you have to find the silver lining in this times right now, and so for us, we're really excited to have you back and see what we've done and how we can do that sustainably, because you're right, we don't want to do something then have to change it again because of different orders, so we're trying to be as smart as possible. So Abeja wine, so this month is Walla Walla month. If you haven't been to Walla Walla, you need to put it on your list of places you can go to, and it's drivable, so it's not like you have to get on an airplane to go there, but it's definitely worth it. Tons of wineries, the little main street's so cute, lots of tasting rooms and little boutiques and
great little hotels. We have a sister hotel out there as well.
Yeah, the Finch.
Yeah, just really fun little small city, especially for a weekend. And then it is kind of in the heart of that area's wine country, but you go out towards Yakima and everything else, and there's a lot of great little wine country out there. So it's a fun trip to make for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually got to go to Abeja last year around this time.
Yeah, actually.
That we went for a food and beverage summit with Columbia Hospitality. And oh my gosh, what an amazing, beautiful, historical, like farmhouse type vineyard. They've converted the barns into suites. And so it kind of has this real like country farm vintage boho kind of feeling. It's really cool. And just the setting is just gorgeous. And there's a little creek that runs
right
through there.
Around the back, and it's at the foothills of the Blue Mountains, so you're right there, and just a beautiful view. About 4 miles outside of downtown Walla Walla, and it's appointment only. So if you decide to make a trip out there, definitely make an appointment ahead of time. The suites and cottages and things like that are also beautiful to stay at the property as well. But it is a couple minutes out of town, but it's just beautiful out there for sure.
Yeah.
And the wines are incredible.
Incredible wine. So I just saw, looking at, they have a new rosé made from
Mourvedre. Yeah, which I've never had.
I've never had that either.
Mourvedre rosé, so we're both interested in that.
Yes.
So that'd be fun.
Because rosé all day, right? So this is Abeja Cab Sauv. One of my favorite Abeja wines is the Beekeeper White, and it's 100% Chardonnay, but it's a little bit lighter. It has like Asian pear notes and a little bit of lime and vanilla, and it's super, again, not heavy oak, super light, and you get that little bit of that honey flavor in it. It's delicious.
Yeah. So Abeja actually means bee in Spanish, and so that's where the beekeeper and label and everything else comes from. It was started back in the 90s by Ken and Ginger Harrison, and now Dan and Amy Wampler now run it, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
They're actually both the co-winemakers as well, and so they have long history in winemaking, both of them for sure. and what they're turning out is great. They are very small. It's boutique, so it's around 7,000 cases, I believe. So it's a much smaller winery, so it can be hard to find in retail outlets and other things. So.
Yeah.
But it is a wonderful.
It smells so
The
good.
Cabernet is great. Like I said, it's mostly from the Blue Hills, foothills of the Blue Hills outside of Walla Walla, and everything I believe is estate grown, and just a beautiful property there. Expanded into, we were there and witnessed the middle construction of their wine cellar and their wine room, and the expansion that they're doing there, and that'll also probably allow them to create a lot more wine.
Yeah,
So,
more storage for them.
yeah.
So this is delicious, and it's yummy, and I hope you're all super jealous. And if you, they actually do have a wine club with the Beha. I don't know what their wait list is to join it, but it's definitely worthwhile if you're down in the Washington area to join the Beha Wine Club, because you'll definitely, what I love about wine clubs from individual wineries is just you have access to wines that are just not on the market. So those are the kinds that, those are like, it's like showcase pieces in your wine cabinet, right?
I used to work for a winery in California, Ciego Vine Gardens, and they when we ran the wine program there, the wine club, that was where we would put in a unique bottle. Either it's before release, not enough to sell retail, or something else, and we had things like Cab Franc and a winemaker's blend that wasn't that we didn't produce enough of to really be able to sell retail.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we had upwards of 1,000 members, and so if we had that count that went in there, a lot of times either wouldn't make it into retail, wouldn't even make it into the tasting room, and it would appear in your wine club shipment, and I know people really appreciated that. So
Yeah.
a lot of wineries, and some wineries will allow you to choose what type of wines too, so find the wineries. But if you find a winery that you enjoy majority of their wines, then I always say it's very beneficial because you get unique things.
Yeah.
It exposes you to possibly stuff that you would never try.
Yeah.
I'm excited to try that Rosé Mourvedre, but that's the type of thing that you may have not ever heard of it, and it just shows up in your wine club. So
Yeah.
it could be fun.
That's a lot of fun. I love that, right? Just try something a little bit different, a little bit new that you normally wouldn't try, because I think so many people put wines in a box and figure, and I have to make fun of my mom again because she's my mom and she's not here, so she can't slap me. So, but she would always say like, "Oh, this doesn't taste like a true Merlot," and it's fine. I just love making fun of her, and I'm like, "What's just a type of grape?" But here in North America, we call wine by the type of grape it is, but everywhere else they go by the region where it was grown. So that is more important than what type of grape it is. I mean, it's important what type of grape it is, but the climate, the soil, that is so important, and that really will stylize that grape. So that will have a bigger say in the portfolio of that fruit profile is what I'm trying to say. I have troubles with words sometimes. And so that is more important. So I know I've heard winemakers come to the wine dinners and talk a lot about like Red Mountain in Walla Walla, like how special those grapes are that are being grown there. And so they would love to see, instead of saying it's a cab from Red Mountain, that it's just a Red Mountain. And that is the type of grape it is.
And then it
Or
comes,
wine.
and then it, like in France and most other places, it would come down to the chateau or the winemaker or the specific house that makes that wine to make those blends and create their own style. And so you'd say, I would like a, Red Mountain, red blend, or, red wine from a specific area, and then that's the type of wine that you would get. And it could be, and you look at most wines nowadays, and unless you get 100% varietal of something, winemaking has always been blending and creating what you want. And so, you look at the back of any bottle that says Cabernet, and it's 75% has to be Cabernet. Everything else can be whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so, if you're going to that point of saying this is Cabernet, again, think it's not actually Cabernet. We already do that. We just don't list it and name it that way. And that's, it's just an American style. It's just different the way we do it here. But yeah, I would agree. I prefer to see things a little bit more domain and terroir orientated than specific varietals. You get caught in a trap where you think that all Cabernet, a decent Cabernet starts at $30. Well, it doesn't, you know, I mean, it can, but, you know, you can find quality in different categories, and, you know, different houses and different wineries produce at different levels, and so, you know, somebody may be producing their Cabernet blend, and it could be going into specific barrels and aged really long, and that's a $100 bottle of wine. Somebody else down the road could be taking quite a similar, you know, grapes, but a different approach, much more economical, get that to the market quicker, and it's not necessarily a bad wine, it's just a different style, and it ends up at the market for $20. You know, and that just really depends on the individual producers and stuff.
So it's really interesting. There's a lot to know. I used to own a bakery and a retail shop, and I had a cheese shop. And when I opened it up, I had no idea how much there was to learn about cheese. And there's a lot to know about cheese.
Oh, absolutely.
And then getting into wines, when I started here and getting into the wine club and taking over, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to know about wine. Like, I thought cheese was big. Wine's huge. And there's so much to know between the technique and what's it's being aged in, oak versus steel versus now clay pot. So that's growing and trending in popularity to store the wine and cure it in these clay pots, burying them underground. So there's just so much different variety that you just can't ever possibly say, well, that's not an actual Merlot. Well, no, it is. It just was styled differently, or maybe it was harvested at a different time, or what was the climate, what was the soil, how old are the vines?
I mean, I've had a white Merlot, and I've also had a dessert Merlot.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've got a Merlot Rosé, which is technically the white, but we do get stuff that this is what you do with this type of thing. But you know, thankfully, we have a lot of people that are in the wine industry that are innovative and are innovating and trying to do new things.
So creative.
And you know, we try to stick to the classics and what we want, but you know, there is a lot with technology coming out, and not just technology in how we produce it, but technology in how we actually chemically read the wine. And we now have the ability to, you know, for pretty small labs, like look at the chemical makeup and understand why the wine is that way, not just have it as a technique or what you have done in the past, but now we can say, I want to achieve this, how do I do it? You can do it chemically and you know, a little bit more lab work.
Yeah, absolutely. So, any questions so far? Jess? No one?
Nope.
Okay, so I did ask, we put out a little teaser and asked questions. We would really love to hear from you guys. What do you want to hear us talk about? What do you want us not to talk about? My mom. Let us know. We really want to hear from you. We want to be engaged with you. Like I said before, we're in this industry because we love people, and it's really hard doing our jobs without interactions with lots of people. So please send in your questions or your comments. Are you enjoying our series? Let us know, okay? We'd love to hear from you. We did have a couple of questions come in that we're going to answer. They came in to my own personal Facebook. So one of the questions was, how do you store red and white wine differently? So you can store red wine one way and white wine another way. Before the bottles are opened, it's not so much, it doesn't matter what type of wine, it's going to be on what kind of cork you have. So for a traditional cork, you want to lay your bottle on the side. Champagne, you don't want to necessarily lie on the side because you might lose the carbonation if you leave it too long. Sorry, you don't want to leave it too long standing up, or you start losing carbonation. About a month after storing it upright, you're going to want to store it sideways. Okay? So once you've opened the wine, 10 to 13 degrees Celsius or 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit is where you want to store your wines at. Once it's opened.
Yeah, once it's opened, so that's another question that I get a lot is, you know, how long is wine good for? It is different between the wines, and it's also a personal preference. I can say that Lise and I kind of agree that it's not often that I've opened up a red wine, drank, you know, a glass or two and came back the next day and it was, you know, even palatable, let alone good. Some heavy Cabernets you can. One of the things that is a big pet peeve of mine is returning the cork to the bottle as soon as it's open.
Which I did earlier. I left it off and go, this is what my wife does. It's such a heavy, put the cork in.
And it's
true.
I learned it from a great wine educator that I worked with years ago, a chef, Ivan Sislak, and he always made sure that every time that a bottle was open, that cork went back in immediately. I don't know how many times you get distracted and you have a conversation and you leave that cork open and something else happens. Well, even if you're going to drink this for the next 20, 30 minutes, you still want a cork in it and you want the aeration to take place in the glass. There are great fancy aerators that you can use to pour out, which is great and can really improve either a very tight, older, highly developed wine, or sometimes just improve kind of a cheaper wine that needs a little to get it. And so they have the pour-off aerators. The other thing too is to do little experiments. Leave it in there, pour 2 glasses, drink very lightly, drink one of them, come back to it in 10 minutes after you haven't touched it, and see if it has changed dramatically enough. But as far as wine goes for storage and things after it's been opened, Cabernet or a red wine, if you were to open it and you're not going to finish it today and you want to use it for tomorrow, then I would make sure the cork goes back in and you can refrigerate it. Refrigeration does diminish and slow down the oxidation. It does not stop it or prevent it. You can use a chemical additive, like a gas additive like argon or ozone or something else that often comes in those little sprays. You can either spray in or the needles that inject it in there. That can help and that can get you a couple extra days. The other question that we received was about turning it into vinegar and whether wine, once it's become vinegar, is it usable? Well, wine doesn't become vinegar. You have to help it turn into vinegar. And so you have to add a culture and a starter to it to create that mother of vinegar. You can buy them dried, in powder form, or what I've done in the past is I've bought organic with the mother apple cider vinegar, and I use that to start. If you're going to take an old wine and try to create vinegar with it, to be able to do that, look up the recipes. There's great ratios, but you always water down the wine because otherwise it has actually too much tannins and other things in the wine, especially red, to be able to add directly to a vinegar. It will actually set off the acidity level. And what you want is a slow rise in the acidity level and kind of a balance. You want the mother vinegar to do that. And so once you add watered down wine to a mother of vinegar solution and you want to turn that into vinegar, room temperature with a covering that allows air for 3 months, and then you can start pouring off vinegar. So if you're going to use wine to make vinegar, which I do at home, every time you add to that, you have to wait 3 months before that vinegar is reaching acidity that you can consume and is healthy and stable. And so if you're looking to do that, wine doesn't just turn to vinegar on its own, and now you can make a vinaigrette with it. You have to make an effort and create that. So,
yes. And if you have let your wine sit for more than red wine, 3 to 5 days is about the recommendation, then don't cook with it after that. If you're not going to drink it, don't cook with it, because that same mange, I don't even know how to describe it, that same like yeasty flavor in the wine when it's corked is going to translate into your food. So if you wouldn't drink it, don't cook with it.
Yeah.
It's gross.
Yeah, and even adding it into my vinegars, I won't use a bottle that's been sitting around for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I typically just don't use those for very much, and I try to do something with it as quickly as possible. And so if I know I'm not going to be using it right away, I've actually frozen it, poured it into a container, froze it, and then I can use it for a marinade or something else later. It's not really going to be drinkable. It's going to break down a lot quicker, and it's not going to have the same flavor profiles, but it won't necessarily, it won't allow it to oxidize and diminish to the point that it's no longer palatable. And so obviously I don't leave it in the freezer for very long. It's a very short-term process.
Yeah. White wine holds a little bit longer, maybe 5 to 7 days in your fridge. Again, it really depends. If you're going to open a really nice bottle of wine, do it when you have company over, or you've got the stomach to drink the whole thing. It just doesn't taste right the next day.
Or gassing it or something to take that extra step, because if not, then it will oxidize and it will not be the same wine. Say you do that with a really a thick, tight old, heavy Cabernet, yeah, it could be better the next day. That's not necessarily to say that it will. And it's dependent on the wines and your taste. Some people do like much more aerated, lighter wines. Some people like a little bit more tightness and tannins to them. It's all personal styling as well.
For sure. And I have some, I call them Rydell, you call them Riedel. Say the Canadian versus American. It could just be the way I butcher words still. But I have some of their glasses, and I actually have a decanter from them. And I find that I can put a fairly inexpensive Kirkland brand into that carafe, and it actually tastes pretty good. And if I pour that into a regular wine glass, it tastes good. But if I pour from a carafe into another Riedel, I don't know why I can't remember it. It tastes even better. So there are ways, if you're on a budget, to buy a less expensive bottle of wine and help it. You have to put a little bit of investment in the glassware, but it's worth it. It's really, really worth it. And like I said, I'll have company over, and they get the Kirkland big bottle because, I'm not rolling in it. And I don't like to share my really expensive wine. I really don't. It's good. I just want it to myself. So I pour it in my carafe, and it's amazing the difference that it makes being in the right glass. So the right glass actually does make a difference. If you're drinking a Riesling or a Sauv Blanc, you want a tall, more narrow glass. A Cab glass, you want it to be a little bit larger but longer. Pinot Noir is more of a bowl type glass. So you will find that as you delve into wines, that the glassware really does make a difference, and it's worth the investment. And you know what? You're worth it. So another question was, if I'm allergic to red wine, which white wine can I drink that will give me the full body taste of a red? So I'd say look for an oak aged white if possible. And definitely first thing is Chardonnay that comes to my mind.
Roussanne, Morsan,
Yeah, Roussanne.
they can be treated quite similar to Chardonnay, so they can also have a nice body to them. Arnez is another great one, an Italian varietal that does have some nice body to it. Viognier can also be treated quite similar to Chardonnays, where they get a little bit of oak and have malolactic. The most popular wine in the world currently, I believe, is Chardonnay. Before that, it was Riesling. And one of the reasons that it was Riesling is that Riesling goes from, sweet to dry and everything in between. And because of that, it goes really well with wine. It has a very large flavor profile, so it can go from, like I said, very dry to very sweet, but all the flavors that go in between there, all the tropical fruit and other things like that, that can be expressed through that. Again, grown in different areas because it is a hardy grape and it can be grown in multitude of environments, then that adds to that uniqueness and that intensity. And then the other one would be Gewürztraminer, that in my opinion does again have that real depth of character within the grape itself, and so when you move it to different terroirs and regions, it expresses that region quite well and gives you a completely different type of experience. Now, you're never going to get the tannins from red wine into a white wine, so you're not going to get that kind of astringent sharpness that you may miss from having red wine with heavy tannins. And so you're never going to really get there. Rosés and things like that aren't really going to get to that point. And so what your best bet is to just start looking at fuller bodied white wines, find the characteristics that you like in that, and then try to pull from there as what you would like.
Yeah, so two simple ones would be looking for anything that has been aged in oak and harvested in a warmer climate. Those two will have the heavier sugar, heavier, fuller body.
And when they have heavier sugar and heavier body, then that means that they have a tendency to do a little bit more with it. So they'll age it in different barrels. They'll treat it a little differently because you're looking to bring out different expressions. That's another point to start looking at, possibly again, instead of varietals and saying, I like, Sauvignon Blanc. Well, what kind of Sauvignon Blanc do you like? Do you like a Washington, California,
New Zealand,
or New Zealand? Exactly, or South Africa. And so there are quite a lot of varietals, and then you realize that those varietals in those different areas are actually treated differently, and not only just because of the way they're grown, but South Africa has a different winemaking style. Australia has a different winemaking style. So they do that in order to bring out the expressive qualities of that grape. So.
Yeah. New Zealand Sauv Blanc's my personal favorite. Anyways, not that you care. Would you use cheap wine or expensive wine to cook with? What makes the food taste better?
Yeah.
Well, what are you making? If you're adding cheap wine to your food and it's a really crappy cheap wine, like if you're talking like barely drinkable cheap wine, then I would personally cook with it, because that, again, same with old wine, it's going to just translate right into your food. So you're going to destroy your food, or you want to make it better. But at the same hand, I definitely wouldn't open a $75 bottle or a $30 bottle necessarily and cook with the whole thing. You were saying maybe like a quarter cup or something like that, but you want to be able to drink that.
And that's where, like on last week's cooking demo, we did the Bear Rouge and that butter sauce, and so I would use a small amount of good wine for that, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm serving, short ribs or something like that. I wouldn't use an entire, bottle of really good wine to braise those short ribs. I would possibly take a medium quality bottle of wine, braise the short ribs in those, and then when I'm reducing and finishing that sauce and I go to add more wine to finish it, I'd add like a quarter cup or so of that really good wine at the end that thins it out, creates that flavor profile, because the other wine that the short ribs have been cooked in and braised, and then that sauce has been reduced after the braising process, that has just changed and reduced that wine. You're not going to get the same flavor profile. But if you want to use that really good wine, add it closer to the end, and try not to cook it off so much. That's actually the benefit of a lot of the wine dinners, is that I explain it with every dish how I've either incorporated the wine into the dish, or the reason behind the flavor building and profiles, because it either has a complement or a juxtaposition or something else to that wine with that dish. And so the idea behind it is that there is thought going into how it pairs and the uniqueness and difference to it. It's not always just simply this tastes like peach, I'm going to eat peach.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. So no straight answer on that one.
Wine is very individual.
It really is. It really is. I mean, like we said that last week, it really, at the end of the day, it comes down to preference. And what do you like? I mean, you might not like red wine. That would be an allergy. You just might not like it. I would say try it. I know some people have said they don't like white wine. They only like red wine. I would start with a Sauvignon Blanc. Start with a Riesling, something that's a little bit, I think, like friendlier. Like it's approachable. And then just start with that. Don't just try one and say I don't like that, because maybe it could have just been a bad bottle. Not just even that you didn't like that wine, but it could have been that was a bad year, or that was maybe it was corked and your host didn't realize it, or you didn't realize it when you opened it, that it was actually bad. And that does happen sometimes. So
absolutely. Actually, it's I've heard statistics of anywhere from 1 in 20 to 1 in 50 bottles with natural cork is corked.
Yeah.
And but it's either corked to a degree that we can't tell, or we don't necessarily know. The other thing too is that if you open up, I mean, I say this every once in a while, but like if you open up a bottle and you try it, I've sat there with winemakers and you open up a bottle and you taste it and you're like, what do you think? And they're like, what do you think? And you're like, well, did you intend this? And they did, and they're very proud of it. And you're like, this isn't what I would do, or this isn't necessarily the best wine, but that was their intentions. And that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily know that all the time.
Yeah.
But if you get a bottle and it's corked, unless you know what that bacteria smells and tastes like, you might assume it's just a wine.
So
the other piece of advice on that is that corked wine, take it back.
Yeah,
they will take it back. Take it back to the grocery store. Take it back to anywhere. If you know that it's corked and it was a bad bottle, it doesn't happen very often. But they take it back.
They will.
And they will it's not even the store's responsibility. That grocery store, wherever you bought it, will send it back to the distributor. The distributor works out a program with the winemaker. Because it is a common thing. That, I mean, I've worked in a tasting room. I've opened up the bottle, and there you go. Okay, I set it aside because this one's no good. You open up another one. When that used to happen, didn't happen that often, but when that happened, that's when we would teach a little class. Like, can you tell the difference? Yeah. And most people couldn't. So I know it took me a while.
The best way I can describe it is it just has a yeasty quality about it.
And not a natural yeast. It's almost like it's almost like a bad sourdough starter. Yeah. It's not, champagne has a yeastiness that you expect and respect, but it's misplaced if you experience that in a red wine, especially. So.
Yeah. And last question. I don't know how we're doing on time here, because we'll just keep talking. Is what wine is best for sangria? And both of us kind of agree a drier wine, but again, it's preference, right? Do you like your sangria super sweet, or do you like it a little bit drier? I like white and red sangria, but I like to use, for white, I always use Pinot Grigio, and for red, I tend to use a Merlot because it's a little bit drier without being totally dry. But when you're adding fruit and I always add brandy to mine. If it's a sweet red wine that I'm using, it's just way too sweet and it just gives me a headache. But I don't like super, super sweet sangria. That's my preference.
I always just go back to Spain, where it's from. And so I'll typically use a Rioja or something else from the region that has that intensity, that deep red. But then I've added Sprite to before to lighten it up if it's too dry, if it's too intense, or San Pellegrino or something else. Where if you go too dry and you're looking for that sweetness, then you can add the fruit juices, or some kind of soda. I mean, it's typically not. But it does add it, create a nice light effervescence. And then the other one is, to do a white sangria, and those are great as well.
Yeah,
and sometimes,
I love white sangria.
And I've done white sangria with Spanish cava as well, because that again is, I just always think, a sangria is Spanish, so I just lean towards those wines. But it can't be done with any wine. And again, it's I've seen recipes out there that use,
peach schnapps.
Yeah, like lots of different things, and so it's about what recipes that you like and what your preference is, and then my sister-in-law, she loves sangria, and she's when she had a couple that she liked, she just got that recipe, and that's what they do now. That's when they make sangria, it's this one recipe because it's fantastic, and once you know what you like, I mean, power to you.
Great. So speaking of recipes, and us wanting to hear from you, send us in your favorite sangria recipe. And we'll pick a couple of them and we'll make them up here and we'll try them for our next fireside chat next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And we will test your sangria recipes to our best of our abilities, because we have a limited pantry here right now. So please don't send us anything with crazy ingredients that we don't have easily accessible. But we would just love to engage a little bit with you and try your recipes. And then who knows, maybe it'll be on our menu when we finally are able to open. Who knows? So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you tune in tomorrow. Do you want to
so tomorrow we're going to be exploring and talking about sushi. Very simple processes, but we'll be making some sushi rice. I'll have a couple pieces of fish. It'll be very simple, but it'll be, again, more of a discussion and talking about the practices of how to make sushi, what goes into the whole process, and how it truly is an art form.
Awesome. Tune in tomorrow at 3 o'clock here at Semiahmoo Resort's Facebook page. Thanks for joining.
See you tomorrow.